Joining me now is Mike Fegelman from Honest Reporting Canada. Mike, I've never had you on the show. That is to my great regret because I am such a follower of the important accountability journalism that Honest Reporting Canada does to hold people to account for not telling the full story. Mike, tell us a little bit about what Honest Reporting Canada does.
Sure. Well, thank you, Sheila, for having me on the program. Honest Reporting Canada was conceived in 2003, and we do one thing, and we do it really well. We ensure fair and accurate Canadian media coverage of Israel. We monitor all of Canada's news outlets, whether print, broadcast, electronic, academic, alternative, French, English, Arabic, trying to make sure that journalists are telling the truth. They're not disguising their opinion as news, that they're doing what they're tasked to do, to be objective, to be neutral, and to provide real journalism about what's transpiring.
And it sounds like you have a very big job on your hands because it is really one-sided coverage. And look, I'm the first person who will say I'm biased, but I'm not making anybody pay for it. And I'm honest about that. And I think the mainstream media frequently presents itself as completely unbiased, middle of the road, and then their coverage is anything but. And then there's this extra layer of government funding added on the top of it, particularly with CBC, but now I guess with the vast majority of media in this country. And I think if you're going to take government money and then simultaneously claim to be completely neutral on the issue, I think you have a real responsibility to at least try to present yourself that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody has a bias. It's impossible to deny that. But a professional journalist is tasked to set those personal views aside. And, as it relates specifically to the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, which is, I think, if my numbers are correct, $1.4 billion in annual funding of taxpayer dollars, the journalism, by and large, is tunnel vision of one-sided anti-Israel coverage, where there's a jaundiced view and a lack of a marketplace of ideas, certainly about Israel and the Middle East, where you have journalists who are effectively putting a magnifying glass on Israel. Anything it does or does not do is under scrutiny. And look, criticism is healthy. It's part of a vibrant democracy. But when that criticism singles out Israel for opprobrium and exclusive censure, that it demonizes the Jewish state, it holds it to an unfair double, even a triple standard, and it delegitimizes its very existence. What that actually translates to is its complicity in the fanning of flames of hatred against the Jewish people and the nation state of the Jewish people. So the stakes are very high, and it's not a surprise to any of your viewers about what domestic Jewish community and worldwide Jewish community is experiencing, which is, quite frankly, it's not even a tidal wave of anti-Semitic Jew hatred. It's a tsunami that is quite frankly, become ubiquitous, where there's this normalization, I might even say weaponization of toxic hatred against the Jewish people.
So I guess I'll ask you, what role do you think this one-sided journalistic coverage of Israel from, by and large, the mainstream media, what do you think that role, what is the role in really exacerbating that, I'll be frank, the Jew hate we see on the streets of Canada's major municipalities? I mean, it is like in Jewish communities, it's not just, an anti-Semitic march, through town. It's now targeting Jewish communities. And so I guess what is the role of the one-sided media coverage of this?
Sure. Well, look, if you look at what anti-Semitism is an irrational hatred of Jews. It is not that Jews did something or didn't do something that has caused this. But what the media coverage does is it provides fuel to the fire. When Canadians are told that Israel is not a people who were on the receiving end of a genocide, but were the actual ones committing it, when they are told that they are inflicting upon the innocent Gazan population a famine that's committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing, every possible buzzword without looking at the context, without actually doing its due diligence and providing the truth, it's not a surprise that some of the media coverage ends up being a bit of a dog whistle to people that serves them with not just an incentive, but a rationale for them to specifically target the Jewish people. And, this in a climate where there's far too much of an allowance, a passing of buck of responsibility for regular stakeholders, whether political or police, to actually try to rein in the hatred that is in our midst.
Yeah, I think it sort of legitimizes for people who hold this irrational Jew hate, when they can point to the CBC and say, see, they said it on the CBC, it sort of justifies the way they feel. And it is completely grounded in nothing.
I love how you said that. It creates a veneer of legitimacy. I mean, look, I'll tell you, Canadian journalists, by and large, my experience, sometimes feel like they're immune to criticism, which is, not a surprise, but certainly not healthy. And there's this lack of acknowledgement of their own fallibility, a lack of just a simple need to atone for their journalistic shortcomings. I mean, I'll give you an example. When we had CBC just a week or 2 weeks ago, who produced an article that depicted an organization that glorifies Hamas terrorism as being, in parentheses, I quote, a human rights group. This is not just a gross sanitization of real extremists in society. This grants them that kind of a legitimacy. So it's not a surprise that in a world of misinformation and disinformation, that it's so difficult to discern fact and fiction, that our media are really complicit into misleading Canadians.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was sort of thinking about how this all happens. And there's a real playbook in a lot of these mainstream media organizations, CBC, Toronto Star, and some of the other ones. And it is exactly what you pointed out, where they are not presenting the fulsome view of the person that they're talking to. It's the catch-all phrase of a human rights activist. Well, I believe I am that too, but I'm a lot of other things too. And so they don't, they say this is an anti-war activist or a human rights activist or an anti-Islamophobia activist, but they don't drill out and say, and they said these crazy things about the Jews and October 7th. And again, it's dishonest at the end of the day.
It is. And I would even argue that what you're pointing to, which is typically regarded as the most egregious form of media bias, which is bias by omission, is the most troublesome. An example that's happened recurringly with CBC is they've platformed a Gaza-based, quote unquote, they say freelance journalist who is openly linked to the Iranian regime, works for Press TV, which is Iran's propaganda organ. And if you go to his social media handle on Twitter or any of his other platforms, it's just open anti-Israel hate, pro-Hamas sympathies, talks about them having virtues of morality. This is somebody that CBC platforms who is, we believe, paid by the Iranian regime. CBC doesn't disclose that this is somebody who is working for Press TV, and doesn't mention that the Canadian government in 2022 sanctioned Press TV as an outlawed organization. So the kind of concealing of this information, it serves to mislead Canadians who, they should have a trust in their public broadcaster, but it's not a surprise that they don't.